Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. In this simple tutorial, we are going to create a very simple PHP program that is going to be fetching YouTube video thumbnails. So let's say you go on my channel, right click, copy link address, and go back to the program, paste the URL for that video and click get thumbnail, and they are going to display to us the maximum resolution version plus the HQ or high quality version. So just in case you want to see some cross details with the video thumbnail that you always admired, then you can use this PHP program to accomplish that. Let's say we go to this channel, copy this URL, paste it, get thumbnail, and they will fetch us the maximum resolution version and the high quality version, and this is it. So in case you want to have some cross look to these thumbnails, go to free code camp and let us test which one. This, copy link address, go back to the program, paste, get thumbnail, and we shall get this. You excuse my internet speed. Go to Brad Travis, we copy this, paste, get thumbnail, and they will give us this. So in case you want to take a close look to these thumbnails, you just want to copy the design, just go ahead and use this program. So this is what we're going to be creating in this simple tutorial. So guys, if you're interested, stick around and see how it's done. Alright guys, for us to get started, since you're going to be writing PHP, you need to be having some server running on your PC. Right now I'm using XAMPP, but you can be using WAMP, any of the two. So this is what is running as my server, and then if you have WAMP, you'll see a folder having, or a folder called WAMP, and then when you go inside that folder, then right now for us people using XAMPP, you're seeing htdocs, but for you guys using WAMP, you'll be seeing www. So that will be the folder. So when you enter inside, this is where you're going to create our folder. So I'm going to name my folder YT underscore thumbnail, so YouTube thumbnail. So just name it anything you want. So this is user defined. That's what I have wanted to call mine. I'm going to open this in Git Bash, but you can open it in your favorite text editor. I'm going to use Git Bash to get access to the VS Code quickly. So I'm just going to open my folder YT thumbnail in VS Code, but you can open this folder in your favorite text editor and you'll be good to go. So right now they are opening VS Code. Yeah, we're having VS Code open right now, so we can close out this. We no longer need that. We have created a folder, and then I guess I'll need this side by side. Then VS Code, just come on this hand. So right now we have this folder YT thumbnail. So instead of this accessing that YouTube thumbnail, we're going to clear out that, and then we access YT underscore thumbnail. Press enter, and we shall be on this empty index. So let us create a very simple file here. It's going to be index.php. So the tutorial you saw, I had some styles on the page, but right now I don't want to focus a lot on CSS. We're just going to be writing straight PHP. So what you'll do, if in case you want the stylings, I'm going to leave the link to my GitHub repo and you download the CSS file or the entire file. I just want you guys to focus on PHP for the sake of this tutorial. And why is this taking too long to create a file? Yeah, it has created it. Now let us just write a simple HTML document. And then we are just going to write get YT thumbnail. So that's the title the user will be seeing. So if we refresh this page, obviously they are going to be reading our index.php file, and it will be the one they are going to be displaying on the page. Let us create a simple form. And for the action, we are not going to need the action part because we are going to be handling the requests on the same page, just that we are going to use the method. Oh, not method exists. We are going to use a method of post. So that's the method we are going to be using when we are posting the URL to our code, or sending. Same, posting and sending. So let us create a very simple input, and the type is going to be URL. So we just need to have some simple validation by the browser. When somebody enters something that is not a URL, the browser will just display some simple tooltip to the user. So I'm going to call this, the name I'm going to give it YouTube underscore URL. So that's what we shall hook on to when we are writing PHP to get the value what the users entered here. If you are to refresh here, we're just having that simple input. Let us have it to that size. Resize here. So now let us create some submit button input, and the type we shall want submit, and the value is going to be get thumbnail. Refresh the page and we shall be having this. Let us just add some simple h1 here. Enter a valid YouTube URL. Very simple. Now with this, we can go ahead and start writing our PHP code. So we have the input field where the user will be putting the URL, and the button they will click on when they are submitting to the page. So below this form, we are going to open some PHP tags. Let's scroll up a little bit. And the first thing that we are going to do right now, since you're on the same page, you may not need to check for the click on this button. But for the sake, let us just say if it's set. And what do you want check for? We want to hear if they clicked. Let's go square brackets, cross it here. So let us give this button a name, lowercase, a name attribute, and we shall call it submit. If it's set, if submit is set, if the user has actually clicked on this, if it's set, where do we excuse me. So if it's set, if somebody has clicked on it, Then we shall run the code inside. But it's not necessary because we are doing it on the same page. It's not necessary to check for a click on this button, but this is how you do it. If at all you have an external file, then you need to check if somebody has clicked on this submit button and not just going straight to the action file or the page you will be linking in this action attribute. So that's when you check for that click. Then so we have checked if somebody has clicked on that button. If they have clicked, then inside here we shall be ready to go. So let us create a very simple variable here, and I'll call it video URL, and we are going to be getting this from the name attribute we specified here. So name YouTube URL. So this is where we are going to be getting the file from. So when somebody enters a URL here, we are going to be storing it in this. Let us stop this autocomplete feature. Autocomplete, and we shall set it to off. Oh, submit. I just use single quotes. Let us use double quotes inside here. So this side I had already opened single quotes. So that's it. Sorry for the silly mistake. So we don't need to put this in any quotes. So right now we are having access to the value that the person will be entering here. Let us refresh the page and we lose that error. So right now we have access to what the user will be inputting here. If you are to echo out video URL, let us go to my YouTube channel, copy a link, go back to the program, paste, and get thumbnail. So they will be displaying that to us. Let me first zoom in the browser so that you see it very well. So right now we have access to the value that the user will be inputting in this field. Very simple. Now for us to know the different parts about this URL, because the important part that we want is this video ID. So this is what we are going to use to get the thumbnail from YouTube. But now how can we get access to this ID? And we are going to use the two famous functions. We have the pass URL function and the pass string function. Let me now show you what it does. Let us create a very simple variable. So params, like parameters, you can call it anything you want. You can write perimeters, parameters, stuff like that, depending on your accent. But I'm just going to call them params, short for perimeters. And then I'm going to use a famous function, pass URL. So we want to pass our URL and see the different component it has. So here, as we said, we are passing in the URL, and remember the URL that we are getting from this input field, we have stored it in this variable. And let us not forget this. Let us trim any white space that the person may enter. So let us just write the function trim, and we surround it this super global post variable. So let us just put this inside the trim function. So in case somebody leaves in some space, let's say space, and inputs the URL, we want to first trim out any white space around the URL. So let us just put that function there. It won't cause any harm. So as we are saying, this pass URL, it takes in the URL that you'll be wanting to pass. And I'm going to be explaining what it does. So right now, it takes in the URL and the component, but right now we are just going to pass the entire URL. And what this function does, it just passes the URL and returns an associative array containing any of the various components in the URL or of that specific URL. Let us first var dump and see how this looks like. As I said, it returns back an associative array containing the different components of that URL. So params is what we want to var dump. Let me copy this URL once again. Copy, and let us paste it there, and let's say paste. Oh, some semicolon. I forgot a semicolon here. This is PHP. Let us paste the URL, get thumbnail, and this is what I was talking about. So what this pass URL does, it will return an associative array containing the various components of the URL that is present or input in this URL input field. Now take note of these different key pair values. So we have the scheme and its value is the HTTP. Then we have the host, which is www.youtube.com, and the path, which is watch, and the query, which is this v with the video ID. Let me also echo out this and re-explain the associative array plus the video URL. Let us display the video URL. Let me echo out some simple break tag, separate the associative array and the video URL. Paste this, get thumbnail, and this is what you're seeing. So the scheme will be the HTTPS, then the host will be www.youtube.com, then the path will be watch, and the query will be this v holding this ID that we want. So right now you can see how we are going to be getting this. Now what we are going to do, let us first remove this. We are not going to start with the error handlings. I want us to first go straight to the part where we are going to be getting this ID and displaying these video thumbnails. So for the sake of error handling, we are going to handle it at the end. But let us now first get this ID from this URL. And as you can see, for the part of the ID, it is in the query component or section. Now what you're going to do is use another famous function called the pass string. Right, pass underscore string, and what this function does, it just takes in the string and assign it to a variable in that current scope. Let me show you what it does instead of talking. So what we're going to do is create here. Our string is stored in this because that's the entire URL. So we just want to pick out this component of query. So we are going to say params, and as I said, it's an array. As you can see, it's an array, and in the params we just want this query component. So query, and then we are going to assign it to a variable, and I'm going to call it query. As I said, this function of pass string, it just passes in a string, which is our query, and then assigns it to a variable in that current scope, in this case, which is query. So that's the variable that they are going to assign this string to. Very simple. So right now, if we are to use this variable of query, let me show you here. Let us echo out and we say query. Remember, it's an array. They have just assigned it this value, so it's still an array. And then we want to check for the v, which is holding our id. So v, just do it like that, and let us copy this URL, paste, and we are going to be having access to this id that you're seeing there. As you can see, they have output it here. Let us just remove this var_dum. We no longer need it. Paste the URL, get thumbnail, and we are getting the video ID. So right now we have access to the video ID. I guess you're not lost. This first string, it just takes in the string from the URL. So we have just got this query component only, and we have assigned it to a variable in the current scope. And since we have access to this, remember we have stored what this code or parameter is holding has been assigned to this variable of query, and then we are getting access to the query itself, the value, which is the video ID that we want from the image. If you are to get this address, paste it there, and we shall have a different ID. Very simple. So right now we have access to the ID that we can pass into our custom, the YouTube image URLs, and they get for us the image that we want. Very simple. So as I said, let us just make a simple check. If is set, and what we want to check for is the query. So if the query v is set in the URL, then we shall run the code that we will be running here. Else, if it's not, then we can display to the user, let's say, echo, and then it will be like a paragraph. It will be a paragraph, not like a paragraph. And we can write invalid video, non-CDO video ID query. So that's just, if at all, let's remember to exit. We don't want to execute any code that will be below it. So right now what we are testing for is if this query is not set in the URL, if there is no v in that URL, then they will display this. But if there is, then we shall run the code that will be inside here. Very simple. Let's now break out of PHP because we want to put the image tags inside here. So we're going to break out of PHP and then open PHP this side. So in between here, we can put our HTML, any HTML that we feel like. So what we're going to do, we are going to use the image URLs that YouTube has for us in place to get these video thumbnails. And the ones that we are going to be using for this tutorial are two. We are going to use the maximum resolution version and the high quality version. Let us put our image tags here. So img, short for image, copy that and paste. Or let us first fill this. So the source attribute is going to be https:// we are going to write image img.youtube.com /vi, I guess short for video, and in between here is where we're going to put the ID, and then lastly you put the name of the image, which is maximum resolution default .jpg. So that's what you're going to be using. Then let us copy this, and the last image that we want is going to be HQ, so for high quality version. Now where we have put ID, we are going to be storing the video ID that we are getting from this query. So let us create a very simple variable here, video ID underscore ID, and we are going to assign it to our variable, which is query, and the v. So remember, this was returning back the ID that we got from the video. So whatever they are returning back, we are storing it in this variable of video ID. Very, very simple. So let us copy this variable, and then where we put ID, we want it to be dynamic. So we open our PHP tags and close them, and in between here we say echo, and we put the variable that we created, which is video ID. Then we do the same here, remove the ID placeholder, and we say PHP, and we echo out the video ID. Should we try this and see if we are getting back any kind of image? Let us give it a try. Let us go to this video, copy link address, paste it, and say get thumbnail. Yeah, voila. They are bringing back the maximum resolution default image. It's very big for now, as you can see. Now I talked about not writing CSS, but I guess we need to write some simple CSS right now because they are too big. Let us do this. In the head section, let me write some internal stylings, and I'm going to target all images on the page, and they're going to have some maximum width of 100%, and the height will be auto. Let's try to, let us just now separate these images with names. So the first one, let us put some h1 and say maximum resolution, and then the second one will be the high quality, so the HQ stands for high quality version. So let us go and let's say fetch this, copy link address, paste there, and we shall have this. So right now this is the maximum resolution version, and this is the high quality. So we got access to that video ID, and these are the two functions that we used. We used the parse URL that passes the URL and returns back an associative array containing the different URL components, the ones you saw like scheme, host, path, and query, depending on the type of URL that you'll be passing, and it works on different types of URLs. Then our pass string, it just takes in the string that you want pass, and then assign it to a variable in that current scope. So this is the string that we are passing, and then we assigned it to this variable. And then here we checked if this v query is set. If it is in the URL, then we are free to go on. If there is no, then we put invalid video ID query. So in case v is not in this, let us try that. We paste that, and let's say we put p. They will tell us invalid video ID query, so they won't be seeing the v, and they display this to the user. But in case you put that, then they will fetch back the thumbnails from YouTube. So that's it. This is the code that you have tried to be able to get back these video thumbnails. And as I said, the validation is going to be handled last, and this is the last moment for us. Now I'm going to write each validation is going to be in its own if statement. I don't want to confuse you guys with closing brackets this side and again opening brackets this side. So each validation is going to be in its own if statement for the sake of this tutorial. Now what we are going to do, remember we already have the parameters stored in this variable params. Now what we are going to first check for, let us first check for here if the video URL or the value is not empty. So if empty, if this video URL is empty, if somebody has not put in anything, then we are going to echo out a paragraph, end it with a semicolon and exit so that you don't execute any code below it, and shall say please enter a YouTube, let's say enter URL, So if somebody comes on the page and they try to click this get thumbnail and there is nothing, then they will display to them this. So if empty, if this value is empty, then we display this to the user. So that's it for the video URL. We have handled that error. If somebody comes and try to submit the form without putting anything, and if they try to put anything, so our HTML will bring this tooltip. So since the type is URL and this is not a URL, but this is not safe, you have to put in some more bit of validation, but that's not for this tutorial. Then, as I said, as you remember, this variable of params holds every URL component or parameter that we got from the URL since we passed it. Let me var dump here, var dump the params again, and it with a semicolon, and we copy this, paste. So right now this is what we are talking about. So we are going to check for the host if it is equal to YouTube, and then we are going to check for the path if it is equal to watch, then also check the host, the path. I guess that's it. That's what we are going to check for now. Let's go below this. We are going to create some if statement, and we say if params and then host, we say if it's not equal, so using that exclamation mark, if it's not equal to www.youtube, so somebody can bring in any other type of URL and put it there. So if it's not equal to www.youtube.com, so if it's not equal to this, and then let us also put some fallback in case somebody doesn't put these wwws. Then we say and params, still the host component. If it's not equal to youtube.com, then we shall echo to the user and tell the user, let us create a paragraph inside here. What should we tell the user if it's not a YouTube? Say, please enter a YouTube link or URL. So if at all they may go and get any type of URL, let's say ostoncodecypher.com, and we shall be printing out some error on the page which is not good. So we need to check for the host. If the host is not equal to www.com or not www.youtube.com, and if it's not youtube.com, then we shall display this to the user. So because somebody can go and say https www.oston.com and press this, then we shall tell the user, please enter a YouTube link. Very simple. Now let us also check for the path. So you already saw the path. Let's get here the URL, paste this. So we want to check for the path. If the path is equal to watch, so somebody may put the real URL but comes around and message with the path, and let's say put watched. So we want to check that in our code. I don't want to just throw back an error there. I never wanted to submit. So let's check if params, it's a variable, if params path, so this is the component that we are searching for, or the key pair value, the key, so which is path. If it's not equal to watch, right? Let me use double quotes throughout. If it's not equal to watch, then we shall echo to the user a paragraph p, and then we shall say invalid path, invalid video path. Then we exit because we don't want to execute any code below it. I guess, yeah, that's for the path. Let's say if somebody comes here and tries to put this watched instead of watch, they display to the user invalid video path. I guess you can see how it's very simple. Depending on the var_dam, so we are checking for these keys. So the pair, you can call them keys or components of the URL. So the path, the host, we have checked for the host. Then yeah, the path, the host. Then let us also check for this query key. So if it's set in the browser, because somebody may fail to put that query there, so we can go ahead and say if it's not set, So we shall start with the exclamation mark standing for not. If it's not set, let's say params, and we want the query. If this params query is not set, then we shall echo to the user and say, what should we say? The query part. The query part for the URL is not set. And remember, exit. Excuse me. Let us put this in a paragraph. So if at all somebody comes, paste this, and they remove the query part. So whenever you see an exclamation mark, there is a query. So we remove this part and try to submit. And we shall say the query part for the URL is not set. So if somebody brings in a YouTube URL and they remove the query part, try to submit. Excuse me. There will be shown that the correct one, we get all the things. So guys, that's it for this tutorial. For a nicely somehow designed layout, I'm going to leave it on my GitHub repo. I'm going to leave all the links in the description below. Make sure you download the source code and play around with it and see what you can come up with. Hope you got something from this tutorial. Peace. Be getting this.